My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. I hope you are doing really well. We're into summer. We are literally, it's August. Where did this year go? But man, we're flying along here. And sometimes you're flying along in life and everything changes. And it may happen in a moment that you least expect it. And before you know it, you're in your 60s and you're adopting a kid, not really a kid, a grown man. And you're changing careers, and everything culminates in a beautiful space of learning, growing, and understanding that you never saw coming. And today I am with a fellow coach who's part of the Gay Coaches Alliance, Brian Gorman. He reached out to me and said, I've got a story I think might be interesting. And as soon as he shared it with me, I'm like, okay, let's go there, because this isn't about all of you guys going out and adopting children, but some of you will be in that space like, hey, I met somebody and we want to have kids. Others of you may find the opportunity to do something completely different in life. And that's why we're bringing you this conversation today. So I'm very excited to introduce my two guests, Brian and Brandon Gorman. And I'm going to kind of let Brian take the lead here of like, set us up like, okay, what happened? And why do you feel like this was such an interesting space in your world, Brian, that brought you to feelings and thoughts and actions that you'd never, ever experienced before?
Well, Rick, first of all, thank you for inviting both Brandon and me.
Mm-hmm.
Let me start the story, and then I'm going to throw it over to Brandon.
Great.
Back in 2009, right around Memorial Day, I received an email. And basically, it said, I'm a high school sophomore studying photography. Our assignment is to write the biography and photograph in the style of our favorite photographers. I Googled gay photographers and you're my favorite. May I interview you? Ego said yes. First of all, who would have thought of Googling gay photographers for an assignment like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, this kid is brilliant, which I soon came to learn. We got on the phone because, again, 2009, we weren't doing Zoom things. We got on the phone and I was very impressed by his questions, and one of them turned our world around. He asked me, how did you come to your photography? And I told him my first partner was an artist who made his living in working in a photo lab. He tried to teach me how to draw for 5 years and then told me maybe I should pick up a camera. And then I turned the question back to Brandon. And he said, it's a way to see a world outside the abuse I experience at home every day and the assaults I suffer at school on a regular basis. Ego had said yes. One of the wonderful gifts, if we allow ourselves as gay men, is after I came out, I learned to listen to my heart. And my heart could not say, I hope you get a good grade. So I offered to stay in touch. And within weeks of that first interview, we were staying in touch because Brandon had been thrown out of his home for the summer. So you want to pick up the story there?
Sure. So it was very clear that it was unsafe where I was living. I was living with one of my birth parents, and it became very clear that being gay was not accepted. I was kicked out by one of my birth parents first when I came out at 15. So being kicked out was not uncommon in this experience. This was my second time being kicked out, first time by this parent. And it was really rough. It was during the summer. I luckily had a friend who was there with me to help me get through get through some of the really tough moments that were happening. I then found my way to be sleeping on couches during that summer. Um, and that's when I started calling Brian, my dad. I was calling him being like, I don't know what to do. This is really stressful. And he actually sent me my first camera around that time where I got to actually learn while in a very traumatic situation. So I was couch surfing,
Mhm.
uh, and it was not a very pleasant time. I'll send it back to you, Dad.
Well, I think there's something really interesting here that both of you just brought up. There's like this it's interesting that the metaphor alone, like it's about the photography and lens and seeing things in a different light, but also realizing, at least for you, Brandon, like, okay, this couch surfing, I'm going, there's got to be a place to land. But I think the irony out of all of this is neither one of you would have ever anticipated that this request of, hey, you're one of my favorite photographers, can you help me do this, that this would begin to become the culmination of a whole new pathway forward for both of you. And I think the beauty of what you've just shared so far is the power to lean in and allow things to unfold. And it kind of ties to the kind of coaching you do, Brian, of like really truly starting to let go of the past and allow what is available to us to keep stepping forward. So I just wanted to like capture that. So for you, Brian, where would you like to pick up here? Because I'm sure it goes a lot of different directions from here.
One of the things that really stood out to me that summer was how fierce Brandon is.
Hmm.
And that is not fierce in a nasty way, not fierce in a violent way, but this is a man, a young man at the time of just 16 years old, who was determined to do what was right and was not about to compromise who he is for
Mm.
anyone. In fact, his birth parent took him back in for that school year, but the assaults at his school got so vicious that the school kicked him out. They
Mm.
banned him from the school grounds and started sending teachers to the library to tutor him. And so he began to work with the tutors. I began to work with his parent that did not want a gay son around. And he started to visit me 1 week a month. And during that time, we would work on photography, would work on his schoolwork together, work on preparing for his SATs. And then his birth parent asked me to help with his college applications as we got in further into the academic year and so forth. Eventually, his senior year, I was asked to do campus visits with him and work on
Mm.
scholarship applications with him. So I was stepping in where his birth parent was stepping out.
Mm. So I'm curious, Brandon. I'm making an assumption here, but I don't want to assume because that makes an ass out of me and you both. Um, was the abuse at school all centric around you being gay?
Yes, so I was one of the only out gay males in the school.
Mm.
There was one other that graduated the year before, and one that actually went through a lot of cyberbullying for being gay the same year that I was kicked out from the school. So it did get very bad, and it was all centered around me being gay. I
Mm.
would be groped in the hallway. I would get a lot of different nasty gay slurs thrown at me. It became to the point that I actually had to wear makeup to some extent to pass more as a feminine person. And that actually kind of protected me, straightening my hair every day, wearing makeup, having to change
Mm.
the way I walked. I mean, I was wearing heels at that time as well, so I was doing a lot of different gender expressions. But it
Mm.
seemed like I was safer when I presented more feminine at the school. Now, the other part of the abuse, though, also came from the administration. The
Interesting.
principal of the school called me the gay kid, and
Mm.
that was how I was referred to as the gay kid. And it was very tough because I knew my school did not have my back. At that time, I was a commissioner for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts LGBTQ plus commissioned to help with students in schools. So I was able to reach out to them a bit, but it didn't change what was going on in my school environment. Eventually, they did find a bullet inside the boys' locker room, and it was thought maybe that could have been meant for me as well.
Mm,
So, and as Dad was saying, like it also wasn't just at school. If I was walking home from school, I would have gay slurs thrown at me, cars honking at me, cars wanting to run me over. It was not safe where I lived at that time. I mean, this is a school where there was a prayer group in front of the flag in a public school where they were praying the gay away from me. I
mm,
had a teacher ask me, when will I ever be normal, meaning straight?
mm,
And I had countless times advocated for myself just to be met with, well, there's nothing we can do. You're the problem, not the homophobia.
right.
And that was how bad it was getting at my school. I had shards of pens thrown in my face one day, and the two students that were responsible for this literally were just suspended for a day or two, I believe it was, and that was
Mm,
just a slap on the wrist, like, well, we can't do anything. But as you know, as Dad and I talked about at that time, if it was a female student going through this, it would be a very different situation. But
mm,
because as a gay man or a gay male at that time, the response was, okay, well, why don't you use the handicap bathroom? Because, being gay is not seen as normal at the school.
right.
And it was not seen as acceptable by most people at the school as well.
Wow. Wow. No wonder there's as your dad said, there's a fierceness and a resilience to you because in the light of those sort of actions, abuse, verbal, all of that sort of stuff, I think all of us are called to either we're going to thrive through it or we're going to go cower and become the victim. And I can't imagine going through all of that personally. I mean, yes, we've all experienced it in our own ways, but to face it on that daily basis, and we know you're not the only person who's faced this in schools and other places. It had to be something that knowing that there was Brian as your shelter in the storm who was mentoring, being kind of the model moving forward. How did that help you build some of that resilience and that drive and determination to be who you truly were?
Well, it was tough because I didn't have many gay role models at that time.
Mm-hmm.
What I was really told was being a gay man, I could only become a go-go boy, a prostitute, or a hairdresser. That was like the scope of my future. But meeting Brian showed me there was a whole other world outside of what I was told. That I could be a
Mm-hmm.
photographer. I could go into my passion of becoming a therapist. These roles that I was told, oh, you can't do that because you're gay. I then saw, oh, there's actually successful people in the LGBTQI plus community that I could also look up to, such as my dad and at that time, I also was getting into using the Harvey Milk Hope speech to help me get through a lot. So I
Mm-hmm.
started really getting into, as Dad said, it's one of those things like who would think of looking up gay photographers? Being in a school that was very homophobic, I needed some place to give me hope. And that's something that also Dad provided, really showing me like there's a life outside of where I was. And that gave me a lot of hope to see more than just through my window in my bedroom being like, oh, this is where I'll be living the rest of my life. So it
Right.
gave me hope that there was a future outside of my own limitations that I was seeing.
Gotcha.
As
Brian, how
Brandon
did the go ahead?
as Brandon was coming to visit me, one of the things that we did was I really introduced him to a lot of the history of
Mm,
the gay rights movement, a lot of the history of AIDS and AIDS activism, and to a lot of my friends who were therapists and photographers and teachers and um, very successful gay men and in some cases lesbian women, um, to show him that there is choice, there is life beyond the stereotype of what he was being told was his future.
What was some of the things that started happening for you, Brian, taking on this new role, having this basically this more permanent fixture in your world? What were some of the shifts and challenges that you started encountering? Some, and also some of the joys.
Well, it's interesting. First of all, I think we were something like 200, 250 miles apart at this time. So our interaction, and these were back in the days of family plan phones.
Mm-hmm.
So during the day, we could only text because Brandon was prohibited from using his daytime minutes. We could talk at night. It really gave me, because I was doing some coaching at the time, I was doing some other work, but all of my work was virtual. It was with clients.
Right.
I was not, and I had been in the past, but I was not active in the gay rights movement or anything else. And so it really gave me a sense of purpose to be there when he needed it. And it was very much uh, on that basis to be there when he needed it as a support for Brandon.
As you navigated away, Brandon, from this family life that you had experienced, and then stepped into this new dynamic of having not only a mentor father figure, but then really being adopted and coming into Brian's world. What were some of the shifts that you went through? Like, okay, now I have a new parental figure. What was that like for you?
It was actually really amazing. As I've talked about in the past with dad, the the parental figures I had in my life, I didn't see as parents because
Mm,
they didn't own that title with how they were treating me. This was also during a time where I was told like my home is not my home, the
mm-hmm,
things that I own are not mine. So being adopted and having a parental figure like Brian really gave me a time to go through reparenting, a
mm,
time to really become, the child to a parent, but also then to grow and to thrive. It's very different from like if you're in a space where, everything is so negative and dark, there's not a lot of space to thrive. But having a parent who deserves that title, who lives as a father every day, it it creates hope and it creates light and a space for a child to grow and to thrive and develop. So for me, it really gave me the sense of having a parent and really having a parent that I never had before. So it was a new experience. It was a healthy experience, and it fostered my growth, which I think that was huge for me. At that time, I was allowed to experiment with my gender expression. I was able to just be myself, understanding the history of our community, and also wanting to be a beacon of hope for others. It just also gave me a sense of purpose and gave me someone that really had my best interest and really had unconditional love. Because in my lifetime, I was kicked out three times, once by
wow.
one parent and two times by the other birth parent. So I've been kicked out three times in my life. And Brian has never kicked me out. He always, he tells me my home is my home. I will always have a place here. I can all, this is real versus where I grew up and it was kind of like nothing was mine. There was no real place if I ever needed a place to
Mm,
go. It was it's very different than what I lived with. So it's wonderful. And it made me a really great it made me very grateful for having a parent who is a parent.
mm. So you brought this up a couple of times, and this isn't like, oh, let's go clear off on a whole different realm, but you brought up gender expression a couple of times. So what would you say currently your gender expression is?
So I used to be much more androgynous and much
Mhm.
more androgynous on the feminine side. I still identify as androgynous, though I identify more on the masculine side of androgyny. I don't do makeup anymore and I don't do heels anymore, but I feel like, as a gay person or a queer person, I do have the luxury of getting to play with my gender expression, even with what's going on in this climate. It's not as safe, but at the same time, back then it felt empowering to know that I could go to school in eyeshadow and eyeliner or wear my heels. And was it always accepted? No, but at least I knew my dad accepted me. Um, Even when I was exploring drag makeup at one point, Brian completely supported me in being able to play with makeup. And even I was doing a project at school one time with men trying on makeup for the first time. And, luckily dad was totally fine with me doing makeup on him as well as some other guys at school. But it was a moment of like being able to see or being able to kind of show people a different perspective on gender expression. One could still be masculine while wearing makeup versus, the
Right.
stereotype of it looking too feminine. So
So I'm going to go back to something that Brandon, you brought it up, but I feel like it's a great question for Brian. So Brandon talks about the thriving and the growing and all that sort of stuff. How has this relationship impacted, in a good way, or even in some negative ways, your ability, Brian, to grow and thrive and see new layers of yourself?
So I was 61 when Brandon was thrown out for the second time and moved in with me. I was 63 when I adopted him. I had no idea what it was to be a parent.
Mm.
And as I have said before, I was a parent all at once to someone younger than 18 and someone very much older than 18 because of the experiences he had been through. Also, because of the experiences he had been through, I was extremely and maybe even hyper protective of Brandon. At the very same time as Brandon was having the opportunity for the first time to be himself. And so we had, serious discussions about, can I track his phone to know where he is? Things like that. But I think one of the things that I learned as a parent that has actually rolled over into my coaching more than once is the realization that as parents who truly love our children, we will always be parents, but we will not always be parents to children.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning how to transition from that parent of a child to the parent of an adult was an important learning for me and an important learning for many of my clients as a result. Because again, in my family, I think I'm the only one of the siblings that ever got beyond being a teenager with our parents.
Mm. Which begs the question that I was going to go to next, which for Brian, and then I've got a different version of it for you, Brandon. So here at 63, you step into full on parenting, all this sort of stuff. I mean, I know you were a little younger when he was brought into your world. How much do you feel your parenting style was either helped or hindered by your own family upbringing and things such as that, Brian?
Is yes a fair answer?
Kind of. I was kind of expecting something like that, like all of it.
Brandon taught me unconditional love.
Mm.
I learned a lot from my parents, and I've attended men's groups where the question comes up, what gifts did your father give you?
Yep.
Because
we all have daddy issues. Let's just go there. We all have daddy issues. We all have mommy issues too, but let's just be real. So been in those environments, man, I get you.
So I got the gift of self-discipline. I started working after school in seventh grade. The gift of knowing that things don't just get handed to you. But I also got the gift of knowing how not to be a parent. And so have brought all of that, and I've made many mistakes with Brandon as well. And part of what's so important about growing into that adult child parent relationship is he can tell me when I mess up, and I can learn from him as well as he learns from me.
So Brandon, we're going to do a little future think here. And I don't even know if this is in your cards, but let's just kind of go. Let's say, 20 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, you choose to go down the parent journey. What is something you feel like, you're going to take forward if you were put into the parenting role that would make you a really great parent?
Well, I think, the big one is the commitment to being a parent and a commitment to a child. It's much more than just adopting someone and being like, okay, everything's, great now. Dad has always been really committed to me, whether it was as my mentor, as my parental figure in my last year of high school,
Mhm.
whether it was becoming, my dad and then legally becoming my dad. Like there's always been this very strong commitment to the role of being a dad and being there for me, which is very different than what I had growing up. I guess one gift that I did get from my upbringing was how not to be a parent.
Mm.
And I've become the opposite of my birth family. And I think that, Brian has really showed me such a level of love and commitment that I never had with a parent before, which has been really important. And I think it also allows for space for children to still grow, just knowing that a parent is there and committed to them. And kind of like the idea that, parents don't just disappear when they have a kid that isn't like them, they stay. That's, about being a parent is not just accepting what we like about our children, but accepting our child fully. And I think that that's really something I learned from Brian being my dad, is that loving the child fully, even if there may be things that are not always wonderful. And we've gone through a lot as a family, and I'm really grateful that Brian has stayed there as my dad every step of the way.
So you brought up the word. It's interesting first that both of you said you both learned how not to be a parent. So that's really interesting from both sectors. I think that's something every generation learns. I mean, I could say the same thing about my parenting, and I know my daughters will say the same thing, like, "Oh, I know how to do this." But what I found interesting, Brandon, what you just shared is this commitment piece, because, and I'm just going to go with an intuitive hit I had when you were saying that commitment is probably not just how he's committed to you as a parent, but it's taught you how to think about what commitment means to you in all aspects of life.
Yes,
Would that be a true assessment?
that is definitely definitely a true assessment. Yes, like because definitely the commitment that I've seen from Brian, both professionally as my mentor, as a dad, his commitment spans beyond just me and does touch the other areas of his life, which has also helped me to see that commitment through all aspects of my life as well.
I think it's really interesting when something like this shows up as a core value, because that's really kind of what we're talking about. And that some people try to go, okay, well, I want this level of commitment in this space, but that's the only space. I'm like, that's interesting, but really at the core, how you do commitment is how you do commitment everywhere. And especially, I'm going to go down this path with, gay men. You may say, I really want to have a committed relationship. Okay, yay, if that's what your thing is. But where else in your life are you practicing committed relationships? Committed relationship with work, with friendships, with parents, and some of it you're not going to have it because it's just the bridge has been, quote, burned, so to speak. But I find it really fascinating when we hear this. And that's why I kind of picked up on that, because I feel like there's probably an essence to you, Brandon, that this, like, here's how I want to use commitment in, an individual relationship, or here's where I see commitment, in my role in my work environment, wherever you're going. And I think it's really beautiful to see that, Brian has kind of helped mirror that to help you break past what you didn't get in your commitment from your birth parents and help heal those wounds, which I'm sure there's more than just what we're talking about here about where that healing came along. But I hope for everybody listening, it's like, this is a beautiful teaching moment of, you have a value, but is that value only aligned in one space, but you're still struggling in all these other spaces? What would happen if that value was aligned everywhere else in your world? It's a beautiful shift that can happen. So as we get ready to wind up here, one of the things that I found most fascinating about even considering doing this conversation was there's joys that come from this, and there's probably challenges. So I'm going to ask each of you the same question. What's one challenge that has been probably the biggest part of this whole transition for you, Brian?
I have been self-employed since 2006.
Mm-hmm.
I had no intention of having a child.
Mm-hmm.
I had no intention of housing and feeding and caring for a young man. And as someone who's self-employed, my income has rode the roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have faced very significant financial challenges together at some times.
Mm-hmm.
And at other times, we have been quite financially comfortable.
Same question to you, Brandon. What's some of the challenges that come up as you stepped away from, a situation that wasn't healthy and challenging, all that, into a new situation? What's the challenge that you faced, stepping in as, hey, this is my dad, and here's a new way of being in the world?
Well, I think a really key one was knowing that I was safe, and kind of there's a challenge in knowing, am I safe or am I not safe? When you grow up with people who you're not safe to be around and you have to be fearful and very hyper vigilant, that definitely came into our relationship where dad noticed I was triggered, sometimes, or I was a little hyper vigilant. And that was definitely like a moment of challenge, but also it became a moment of learning and being able to talk about mental health and kind of the impacts of trauma. But it was definitely a moment. It was a challenge for us at first because it was like, okay, how do we do things, where Brandon feels safe? And that became a moment of just like talking about boundaries and things that work for me or don't work for me, and also reassessing over time, being like, oh, that boundary doesn't need to apply anymore. That's not that no longer is hitting me. But it was a moment where, I mean, definitely I came out about being a survivor of child sexual abuse and incest, where, luckily Brian was there for me. I actually had a partner who was like, why are you so sad? That's nothing to be sad about. And I luckily had my dad, but of course that became another learning curve of like, okay, now Brandon's going through coping and grieving
Yep.
that trauma. How do I support him through that? And it became a moment of challenge again, but it was a moment of learning for both of us, of being, okay, I'm safe here. I don't have to worry about being abused here, even with some of the triggers that were coming up.
Mm. Such great awareness that both of you have brought to this, and the story, and how this is impacted for good, and even in the toughest times. I love that you just shared that, Ryan, about even the financial challenges. Yes, as being self-employed, though, when the clients aren't coming in, like, okay, well, what are we going to do next? And then to add that extra burden to, wow, I've got a family to support. I've been on the roller coaster too. I think the beauty is when you have that, that person that can weather the storm with you, it really helps, and sees how beautiful relationships can be. And guys that are listening, I hope you are taking away some nuggets of wisdom here about how do you be more resilient? How do you be more fierce in your own way? What are the things in life that you think, oh, wow, this curveball just tipped me. Everything is like, this is, wow, it's the end. It's how am I going to cope through? I think the beauty of hearing this story in a different way of, oh, I would have never thought Rick would have had somebody talk about adopting a son and all this sort of stuff. Doesn't mean you got to go adopt, but there's going to be something you do have to adopt. Maybe it's a job change. Maybe it's having the complete world pulled out from under you and like, okay, now what? Step into your power. Let go of what's in the past and let the past be the past. And I think one of the things I love about Brian and his work is that's a lot of where he helps people focus. In his coaching, he brings that. Let's take the past, whether personal or professional, let's let it go. Learn how to let it go so that you can move forward. And I know in his work with his program, NeuroVantage, that's what he's all about. And I would invite each of you, there'll be a link on the website to reach out to Brian, because I'm going to be honest, guys, you've heard me say it before. I can't coach all of you. There's just not enough time in my day to coach the whole freaking gay population. I'd love to, no doubt. But I would love, like, if this is something you're like, oh, wow, I'm really struggling with this. And I know that's not all that Brian focuses on, right, Brian? That's not the only place you focus. But I think the beauty of it is step into those things where your past is challenging you to move forward. And I feel like Brandon, Brian, you both really helped us share that story today. Like, don't let the past keep you in the past and not into your beautiful present or future. So any last words, guys, before we wrap it up that you'd like to share?
Just to thank you, Rick, and to thank Brandon for all of the gifts he brings to my life.
Wow.
Yes, and thank you, Rick, as well. And thank my dad for being my dad. He saved me in many ways. So.
And I think let's just thank the listeners for listening. This is the more this kind of stuff gets out in the world, the better we can be as humans, but especially as gay men. Let's realize we can adopt each other and support each other in really beautiful ways. I think there needs to be a whole lot more of that happening in our gay community at times, and accepting whether it's gay men, queer men, trans men, LGBTQ plus, that's who we are, and embracing that this is where we all have the opportunity to step up and adopt into new things and let the future be where we're going, not the past hold us in the back. So guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of my world. I so appreciate each and one of you. I will say, go listen to past episodes. Okay, that's a little big. Let's go back, listen to some of those if there's something you need to listen to, but keep showing up. Thank you for being part of my world. And I hope everybody goes out there and has an absolutely amazing week. And we will be back with another episode in just one more week. Take care, everyone, and have a great day.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus, Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.